Welcome everyone to Defender for Cloud in the Field. Thanks for your participation, for sharing the episodes, and for subscribe to our channel, the link below. Today we are going to talk about Defender for IoT. This is going to be a really good conversation. I'm really glad that I was able to schedule this with our guest, Dolev Zemer. Dolev, thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, I had a really good conversation about IoT last year, and we evolved a lot since that time. So I wanted to use this opportunity to also have a refresh on the topic. But before I go to the first question, can you please introduce yourself? Just say what you do at Microsoft, the team that you work for, and in your position.
Yeah, so I've been with Microsoft since the acquisition of CyberX. So that's been a few years now. And I'm a program manager, and I help our customers with Defender for IoT.
Awesome. Dolev, as I said, let's just start to set a foundational understanding for our listeners. So the question really is, what is Defender for IoT and how it works?
Yeah, so Defender for IoT is now a very widely used solution. It has been for several years now. We help our customers mainly in the OT and ICS fields, but not only, to really protect the areas that weren't really under protection until a few years ago because they weren't under attack. So think about plants and other areas that we usually didn't think of regarding security as for just a few years ago. And now they are constantly under fire, let's say.
There is also a lot of talk around IoT and OT. I think it's also important to clarify the difference between IoT and OT.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually have a slide about that, if I can share.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to clarify regarding OT. So OT is everything that you can think of that is operational technology. So think about the things that make the world go round. Power generation, think about the plants that produce the cars that we drive, and the phones that we use and the computers. Everything needs to come from somewhere. And those are all increasingly connected devices. In the past, they were just huge segregated machines, but now everything is interconnected, and that really creates a larger attack surface for us to defend.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So it's basically everywhere, even when you don't realize it's actually there. When we talk about Defender for IoT, one of the main questions that we receive sometimes is, do I have to have an Azure subscription to use Defender for IoT?
Yeah, so Defender for IoT is a part of the whole Microsoft and Azure security stack. So you need to have a subscription in Azure in order to use it.
Okay. And is this solution agentless, or do I also need an agent to install on my IoT device in order to take full advantage of the capabilities?
So one of the huge advantages of this is that it's agentless. These are machines that usually you can't install antivirus or agents on. So what we do, we monitor the traffic. We mirrors the traffic from the switch, and we do it without installing any agents on the device and without interfering in the network.
Okay, that's really good approach. Thinking about the way that we capture this information, do we provide secure posture capabilities like recommendations to hardening and things like that, or we are only focused on threat detections?
So actually we do both. So within the system that we have, and I can show it later, we can actually both show you the devices that you have in the network, what CVEs they can be exploited on them. But also we are constantly monitoring the network. So if there's suspicious activity or activity that's outside the norm of that network, you would actually get an alert on that.
And since you talk about suspicious activity, that is something that the sensor will identify the suspicious activity and trigger an alert. Is it possible to automate the response for that alert?
So we do a couple of things. One, we do have integrations within the product for other products within your stack. So for instance, you can automate a response in the firewall to block a suspicious IP address that is presumed to be malicious. But what we find for most of our customers is that they prefer to do the automation within their SIEM source solution. So we integrate into that, and from there, the SOC analyst can either take action himself, or they can put in place an automated response for that.
Makes sense. And since we are talking about SIEM, of course, we're going to talk about Sentinel. I'm assuming that we do have native connectivity with Sentinel to feed Sentinel with those alerts, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things that we really put an emphasis on. We really want the customer that gets the security products from Microsoft to have a clean and seamless experience. So it's very, very easy once you get Defender for IoT to connect it straight to your Sentinel instance and get the alerts and all the data straight there on one single pane of glass.
All right, so you talk about sniffing basically the network traffic and looking at this and then potentially generating the alerts based on suspicious activity. So do you have a diagram just to show a brief architecture overview of how that works?
Yeah, so just to explain in a more graphical way where we sit in the network and how the solution works. So basically, like I said, not only it's agentless, but it's not active in the network. It's a passive solution, and that's really important for a lot of our customers. So within your IT environment, you have different solutions like Defender for Endpoint and other solutions. And within the OT environment, in the switch where you use for the OT environment, you can actually port mirror or span the traffic to a physical Defender for IoT sensor that would be either a React there or a virtual sensor as well. And all the analysis is done on the sensor itself. So you don't have to go with all the data that you have into the network and get it outside your OT environment, but all the analysis is done on-prem on the sensor. And from there, connected to Azure, you have the Defender for IoT pane, and of course, connected to Sentinel, where you can see all the data from all your different collection, or any other SIEM source solution that you choose. We integrate with most of them.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty straightforward. It looks like it's not really that complex. The architecture pretty straightforward. So thanks for clarifying that. Well, let's move on to the demo and see how that thing works.
Yeah. So what I have here is a Defender for IoT sensor that's deployed somewhere in our demo environment, and it's monitoring an OT network. Now, this is the main dashboard. This is where you land when you get into the GUI for that sensor. And I'll dive straight into one of the most important things for our customers, which is the device map or asset map. This is where you can actually see all the assets that you have in the network. Now, it's important to emphasize again, we're not sniffing or actively working on anything in the network. This is all done by deep packet inspection of the traffic that we get. So this is a representation of everything that we see that you have in the network. So right when I dive in here, you can see that this is an environment that has different OT assets. So PLCs and other machines that will be very familiar to people that work in that field. And it's organized in a way that you can both see all the connections, as well as you can see the separation in different layers, the Purdue layers. I won't dive into that, but it's a very common language in the OT and ICS domain. So jumping straight into here, every asset that I have, I can get a lot of information about it. So let's say that, okay, I want to know what this asset is. So if I view its properties, I can see, okay, this is a device that's by Siemens, and it's an S7 device. And I see that it also has a backplane on it with different interfaces. And I can dive deeper into that and see all the racks and slots that it has. Now, this is coming a long way from a field that just a few years ago had binders of the network schematics, and going from binders and pages and huge printers to having this automated asset map is really huge to the people that we work with. So not only we can see it in the way for the asset map, but we can also take it in the table form as the asset inventory. This is also very, very useful for our customers that really want to both have a good view as to the inventory that they have, and also for compliance reasons, they need to be able to print this out or send this to whoever they need for compliance and audits. So this is the first step that our customers take in their journey, the visibility.
And this is great. This is great. I love the main dashboard, very comprehensive. But let me ask you something about the main dashboard, right? How long usually takes to populate that dashboard? Let's say that I install the sensor on my on-premise. It takes like 24 hours to populate that, or even less than that.
No, it's really a matter of you start seeing devices popping up in a matter of minutes from the time that you connect the traffic. And from that point on, we start learning the network. So every device that we see communicate throughout the network will show up here. And from that point on, not only we show the devices on the map, but we also start learning the behavior on the map. But it's not even 24 hours. It's a matter of minutes to see them, and probably a couple of hours at the max until we populate the map.
There is any situation where we identify the device, but since we may not have information about the device, let's say is a brand that we are not aware, and then we show like a generic type of device in the map?
Yes, so we might see a device and not know much about it, and we will provide a type for unrecognized at the moment. But as well as we keep getting the traffic, so we get a MAC address for it, so we know the vendor. After that, we might see that it's communicating with some types of protocols, so we would list that. And when we get more information, we just populate that into it.
Awesome. So the first step is the discovery process. Let's say we have the discovery. We start to play around to see the secure posture of those devices. What's next from the management perspective?
So from that point on, you start to get insights about the network and the behavior of the devices. This pops and populates the alerts view. So you might see alerts for unauthorized internet activity. So that would be an asset in your network communicating outside. You might say, this is something that is interesting to me. This is something that's a part of the regular environment. And you would have to investigate it.
I see that you have a button called acknowledge. What happens when you click on the acknowledge? Are you basically saying, I'm aware of this alert and I'm going to do nothing, or what it is?
So that basically means I'm aware of this alert, and this is and I've investigated it, and I'm acknowledging that we know what this is about. We also have the ability to add comments to these alerts. So you can add a comment saying, I've talked to Yuri, and he said it's okay. It was him just pinging home to see if he can get outside to the internet, and I'm just acknowledging it.
Okay, all right, cool.
But say you need to do some sort of a more complex investigation. We give the option to download PCAP files for each of these alerts. So not everyone that you work with on this alert will be able to get into the Defender. Not everyone wants to get into that. Pickup files is something that everyone in the industry can work with, can process, can understand. This is the single proof that you can give everyone and say, look, this was the traffic, and you can go ahead and investigate further upon that.
That's great. PCAP is something that you can actually find out a lot of information about it. There is another button right there. Is learn. What is the learn? Is to learn more about this specific type of alert?
So the learn button basically means this is a behavior that is normal in my network. This will keep happening.
Oh, okay.
And I just want to keep it as a part of the normal behavior. So let's say that I'm a power gen and I have generators in my facility that are sending telemetry back home to GE or to a vendor or somewhere else. And I know that this is a behavior that I'm okay with. This is an address that this asset is allowed to go to, but only from this asset to that specific domain or IP address. And I'm learning it as a part of the network behavior.
So when you learn this, basically what you're saying is, from now on, you don't need to alert me for this pattern anymore.
Exactly.
Okay, great. And I noticed too, if you close this window real quick, I noticed that the first column has the type of alert, right? Anomaly, malware. So we are giving a brief information about the type of malicious activities. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that correlates to the behavioral engines that we divide these actions into. So we have different types of rules and behaviors that we enforce. And if this belongs to the malware category, if this belongs to the operational type of alerts. So each one will go under one of these buckets for these engines.
Mm-hmm. And they are also organized by severity.
Exactly. So the severity decreases the way that you go down. Although you can see here we have several very severe alerts for suspicious malicious activity, port scan activity, etc. So this is an environment that definitely needs some work on.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. There is any way on this dashboard that I can see, for example, the last 30 days of traffic, or this is only showing X amount of alerts?
So the way that this works, so all the alerts that are currently active will be here. If I need, I also can go back to see my archived alerts. But we also have different modules here, so you can see an event timeline for each of the alerts. So if I go, for instance, for an alert for invalid SMB, and I go to the event timeline, so that would show me the events prior and after that specific activity.
Oh, this is actually pretty cool. This visualization is awesome, actually.
Mm-hmm. So we covered visibility, and we covered getting the alerts as we monitor the day-to-day activity. One more thing that is very important for us is the ability to really get a good view into our environment and understand what are our risks and what are the action items that we need to take. And for that, we have the risk assessment. So this is basically a risk assessment report that you can get in a click of a button. So you generate a report. And what happens is you get a PDF that shows you a good scheme of all the things that you have in your network. What Windows versions do you have? Which devices you have the most severe CVEs? And it gives you a risk score that you can act on. So like I said, this environment doesn't get a very good score, 37%. But not only do you get a executive summary of things, you also get, okay, if you take care of this and that, this is the percentage of score you will gain from it.
Yeah.
And you can go all the way down here, but basically, if you need to plan ahead for the next quarter, or you need to sit down with the CISO in the organization and try to figure out what is the actions that you need to take in this environment, this is a good starting off point.
Oh yeah, it is. Can you go back real quick to the main dashboard? I saw one item that I'm gonna ask you about. I see that you have the attack vectors on the left. What is this about?
So basically, if I jump real quick back to the asset map. So for every organization, we usually have what we call the crown jewels. The assets in the network that if something happens to that, this is where the most important things of the organization happen. So this is where we store the formula for the COVID vaccines, or this is where we store, I don't know, how to assemble the car. And if an attacker gets to that, this is where the big money is. So an attack vector allows us to simulate how an attacker might be able to get to that asset. So if there's an open internet connection to an asset that has a known CVE, and that could be exploited all the way to get to that specific asset. And this gives me the ability to go through that chain and see what I need to patch and how severe that is.
This is really good. So you can use this mostly in a proactive manner to better understand what can happen, and then you can mitigate upfront.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this is great because a lot of people, they focus on reactive manner. In other words, taking actions after the fact, while this is more from the protection perspective. So you're going to do some homework to ensure that they are not exploiting this.
Exactly, and one of the key things that we try to address throughout the product is really talking to a lot of the stakeholders that work in this field. So you can see that the asset inventory, the device map, the operational alerts for the operational environment, things that concern the PLCs, the HMIs, these all talk in the language and the terms that the OT and the ICS guys and the engineers understand and work with every day. Whereas the CVEs, the risk management, everything else also talks a lot to the SOC engineers and the people that security is their day-to-day. And a lot of what we try to do with this product is help all sides of the organization talk in the same language and have a common ground so they can work together to protect that organization.
Dolev, this was extremely great. Great demonstration, great insights. Thank you very much for taking the time. Now, let's go back to the final question, which if I am a customer and I want to try this out, there is any way for me to try it out, the product?
Yeah, so that brings me back to Azure. So as I said earlier, you have to have an Azure subscription for this. And this is really a two-part solution. One part is on-prem, either a physical server or a virtual machine. So with your Azure subscription, you can get a free trial and download and install a virtual machine and really try it out and put a whole lab around this. And you can connect it in your environment and see how that works for your use case.
All right, great. I'm going to also put here on the bottom the documentation for the Defender for IoT, because you can also find more information there about this and other capabilities. So again, Dolev, thank you very much for your time today. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Yuri. Thank you a lot.
All right, everyone, that's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks again for joining and for subscribing for our channel. Again, the link below. Subscribe, hit the bell, get notifications, and keep it up with us. We have much more to come. See you next time.